My name is Charles Renner. I spent the better part of my life building something from nothing, swinging a hammer before I could afford a crew, signing deals on folding tables in the back of half-finished homes, and waking up every morning with the kind of anxiety only men with mouths to feed truly understand. Now in my early 70s, with 2 knee surgeries, a pacemaker, and more gray hair than not, I'd finally reached the part of life where the world was supposed to slow down. I lived alone in the home I built with my wife, God rest her soul. It was our dream, brick by brick, until cancer took her 6 years ago. Since then, my daughter Evelyn had been the center of what little family I had left. Hosting her birthday at the house felt like the least I could do. Everything was catered, the garden was manicured, the string lights were timed to fade with the sun. I wanted it perfect, and for a while, it almost was. The party buzzed with casual laughter, clinking glasses, and the polite hollowness of small talk. Evelyn floated through the crowd in a floral dress, cheeks flushed, hair curled just right. Her husband, Darren, followed her like a shadow, well-dressed, well-mannered, and well beneath my trust. Something about him had always felt off. Too calculated. His compliments were too polished. His concern too rehearsed. He called me sir, like he was still interviewing for the role of son-in-law. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt for Evelyn's sake. She loved him. That was enough, for a while. But as I stood by the patio, sipping watered-down whiskey and watching him from a distance, I couldn't help but feel the way a carpenter knows when a beam is cracked beneath fresh paint. The surface looks fine, but the structure's already rotten. I stepped inside for some air, or maybe just a break from pretending, and wandered toward the study, the one room untouched by party decor. It still smelled like mahogany and tobacco, though I hadn't smoked in years. I was about to sit down when I heard them, just outside the doorway, half shielded by the sliding glass. Darren's voice was sharp but low, hurried and serious. I heard him say, "Do it now. We need to get the inheritance by next week." Evelyn didn't respond audibly, but the silence that followed made my blood run cold. I didn't move, didn't breathe. My own daughter, my only child, stood with the man I never trusted, plotting something that sounded too much like murder to dismiss. Inheritance. Next week. Do it now. I backed away from the door slowly, my body stiff and colder than it should have been. My first instinct was disbelief. Maybe I misheard. Maybe it wasn't about me. But the gut, the same instinct that saved me more than once in business and in back-alley negotiations, told me I'd heard exactly what I thought I did. Something was coming. Something deliberate. And it was meant for me. I returned to the party, face still, breath controlled. 100 people mingled around me, none aware of the mine that had just gone off in my head. I found myself watching Evelyn more closely. She smiled and laughed, took photos with her friends, waved at distant cousins. But when her eyes met mine, they didn't hold. She looked away too fast. Minutes later, she approached with a drink, one of those fruity cocktails she insisted I try. "Dad, you've got to taste this. It's my favorite." Her voice was light, the glass held out between us like a gift. I took it, fingers steady. I nodded. "Thanks, sweetheart." She smiled, kissed my cheek, and walked away. I stared at the glass, the condensation slowly running down my fingers. I didn't drink it. I didn't sniff it. I just turned and began walking toward the table where Darren's father sat alone, sipping a whiskey of his own and scrolling through his phone. He barely looked up as I approached. I set the cocktail down beside him, picked up his glass with a calm smile, and said, "Mind if I trade you? Yours looks better." He grunted something noncommittal. I walked away with the whiskey in my hand and the cocktail left behind. 10 minutes later, his body hit the floor. People screamed. A server dropped a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Darren rushed to his father's side, shouting his name, checking his pulse. Evelyn froze in place, pale as marble. I watched from the far end of the patio, sipping the whiskey meant for me. EMTs arrived fast. Someone called the police. The party was over before the cake was ever cut. But I stayed still, calm, waiting, watching. Because this wasn't panic, it was confirmation. I knew then, beyond any doubt, that my daughter had tried to kill me. And I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. The house emptied in a storm of sirens, questions, and disbelief. Flashing red lights pulsed across the walls I'd painted with my own hands 30 years ago. Strangers in uniforms stomped through my garden, stepping over flower beds and glass shards as if they meant nothing. Darren's father, Frederick, was wheeled out on a stretcher, pale and twitching. His lips were stained with the same artificial red as the cocktail Evelyn handed me. I stood near the front door, answering questions with clipped, precise honesty. Yes, I saw him drink it. Yes, I think it was Evelyn's glass. No, I didn't drink mine. I didn't lie, but I didn't explain either. Not yet. When the last officer finally stepped off my porch and the house fell into silence again, I locked the door behind him and stood there for a long while. The grandfather clock ticked in the foyer, loud now that everything else had stopped. I thought about how small things can spiral, how a single step in the wrong direction becomes an avalanche. My daughter, my Evelyn, had brought me a glass that was never meant to refresh me. It was a goodbye sealed in citrus and sugar. And if I hadn't been suspicious, if I hadn't overheard Darren's whisper, then I'd be the one in that ambulance. I walked into the kitchen, the countertops still sticky with cake crumbs and champagne. I rinsed my glass, then hers, then his. I cleaned slowly, methodically, hands steady even as my chest vibrated with rage. There was no going back to normal. Not after tonight. You don't brush off a murder attempt with a family meeting and a few tears. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a fight that got out of hand. This was planned, calculated. And it made me question everything I'd ever taught her. What kind of father I had really been if greed could so easily replace love. The next morning came in quiet gray. No birds. No sun. Just a sky that looked like it too was holding its breath. I sat with my coffee at the breakfast table where Evelyn used to do her homework. I remembered the way she'd swing her legs under the chair when she was little, humming while she drew. I remembered the time she cried over failing a math test and how I told her, "We don't quit in this house. We solve." But now the numbers didn't add up. The math was poisoned. Somewhere along the way, I had given her too much, or maybe not enough of the right things. And now, she had turned on me with a smile on her face. Detectives came back before noon. Their tone had changed. Less polite, more urgent. They asked again about the drinks, about Evelyn's actions that night, about the relationship between Darren and Frederick. I told them what I overheard. I gave them the exact words. "Do it now. We need to get the inheritance by next week." The younger detective's eyes widened slightly. The older one just nodded and wrote it down. "And you believe they were referring to you?" he asked. I nodded once. There's no one else in this family with anything to inherit. And they knew I had updated my will 2 months ago. He didn't ask what it said. The next part moved quickly. Surveillance footage from the hallway captured Darren and Evelyn's conversation. No audio, but their body language confirmed urgency. She handed him a small envelope, which he tucked into his suit jacket. Forensics later matched it to a packet of powdered poison found in their home. Darren's handwriting on the label, Evelyn's fingerprints on the seal. There were text messages too. Screenshots forwarded from Evelyn's cloud backup, where she'd foolishly saved everything. "If he drinks it, we're free by the 12th. Get him relaxed. Don't make it weird. One toast, Ev. That's all we need." When they arrested her, she screamed my name. "Dad, tell them this is wrong. Dad, please." But I didn't come outside. I watched from behind the curtain as the officers read her rights. Darren beside her, stoic and already defeated. He didn't look at her once. It was over for them long before it began. The trap they set had failed, and now they would rot in the consequences of their own making. After the charges were formalized, after the story hit the news, I sat down with my estate lawyer and rewrote everything. The new will was simple. Every asset, account, and property would transfer to a foundation for orphan teenagers aging out of the foster system. I picked that cause on purpose. I was one of them once. Dirt poor, no family, too many empty Christmases to count. I'd worked my way out. I'd built everything with blood and skin and sleepless nights. And now, none of it would go to a daughter who tried to end me. The house felt larger after that. Colder. The quiet was no longer peaceful, it was hollow. I kept expecting her voice around the corner, or Darren's fake laugh in the living room. But there was only the echo of their absence, bouncing off walls that once held our laughter. I walked through it like a stranger in someone else's memory. At night, I'd open Evelyn's old bedroom and stare at the photographs on the shelf. Her first school dance, prom, the day she got into college. I couldn't throw them away. Not yet. But I couldn't pretend they meant the same thing anymore either. Then, a letter arrived. It was written in Evelyn's hand, the ink slightly smeared as if she'd started crying before she even got to the second line. Dad, it began. I know you hate me right now, and I don't blame you. But I was scared. Darren pushed me. He said we were drowning in debt, and that we'd never survive without something drastic. I didn't know it would go this far. I swear I didn't. I crumpled it. Not out of anger, but exhaustion. Because even now, she wasn't sorry for trying. She was sorry for getting caught. The news broke on a Wednesday morning, 3 days after the party, and by noon the neighborhood had turned cold. Local channels ran the story with that breathless kind of solemnity they save for family tragedies and political scandals. Daughter and husband accused of poison plot against retired builder. My name wasn't mentioned, but my face was. A photo from a community fundraiser 5 years ago. They blurred out Evelyn's face in some of the earlier clips, but by the second news cycle, they dropped the courtesy. The whole world now saw her the way I had come to, smiling, beautiful, dangerous. The comments on social media were fast and brutal. Greedy millennial couple once said, "That man gave her everything. She deserved nothing." I didn't find comfort in the outrage. It was just noise, loud, chaotic noise on top of the silence that already filled my home. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from reporters, emails from advocacy groups, voicemails from people I hadn't heard from in decades. Just wanted to check on you, Chuck. Heard the news. Can't believe it. That was the theme, disbelief. But I didn't have room for that emotion anymore. The truth had settled like concrete in my chest. Belief had nothing to do with it. It was survival now. Legal survival. Emotional survival. Spiritual survival. And somewhere beneath all of it, I was still that boy who once slept in the back seat of a car because his parents had nothing left to offer him. That boy swore he'd build something so strong, so permanent, that no one could ever make him feel disposable again. The detectives came back that afternoon, this time with more paperwork and less patience. Darren had confessed, not to the poisoning itself, but to the plan, the inheritance scheme, the research into undetectable toxins. The life insurance documents Evelyn never knew he'd forged in her name, too. That last part almost made me laugh, bitter and quiet. She thought she was his partner in crime. She was just his pawn. I asked the lead detective if that mattered in court. He shrugged. They'll both go down, just different depths. That was enough for me. I sat in on the arraignment, not because I had to, but because I needed to see them in chains. Evelyn wouldn't look at me. Darren tried to, but I stared right through him. The judge read the charges with all the emotion of a weather report. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, tampering with evidence. Bail was denied. Evelyn whimpered softly behind her cuffed wrists, mouthing "Dad," once as she was led away. My lawyer whispered that I didn't have to attend the rest of the hearings. "You've done your part," he said. "There's nothing left for you to do." He was wrong. There was plenty. I went straight to my bank and closed every joint account that had Evelyn's name on it. Then I froze the trust fund I'd created for my granddaughter's future. That part stung more than I expected. She was innocent, barely 6, with eyes that lit up like her mother's used to when she saw the ocean. But I couldn't take chances anymore. Not even with love. My new will was filed the same day, everything to charity. I didn't care if it made the papers. In fact, I hoped it would. Let the world know that my legacy was now meant for those who fought to survive, not for those who tried to cheat their way through. But the fallout wasn't just financial. It was personal. I started getting letters. Not just from Evelyn. Those came regularly now, full of rehearsed guilt and manipulations dressed as remorse, but from cousins, old friends, even my late wife's sister. "Are you sure she really meant to do it? Maybe she was coerced. You should talk to her, Chuck." I didn't respond to any of them. I didn't owe explanations for saving my own life. I didn't owe forgiveness to someone who only regretted being caught. Still, I found myself talking more to the dead than the living. I stood in front of Linda's grave for the first time in a year and let everything spill. She tried to kill me. I said out loud, like I needed the universe to confirm it was real. Our daughter. The baby you held to your chest. The girl you taught to bake and braid her hair. She looked me in the eye, handed me poison, and smiled. I waited for the wind to shift, for some kind of sign. But there was nothing. Just the quiet judgment of stone and grass. Just me. That night, I pulled out the old photo albums. The ones Evelyn used to love flipping through when she was little. There we were, her sitting on my shoulders, covered in beach sand. Her first bicycle, her first lost tooth, her graduation. For a moment, I let myself miss her. Not the woman she became, but the girl she was. The girl who used to hug me tight after nightmares. The girl who once cried when I forgot her birthday, and I swore I never would again. But nostalgia is a liar. It tells you the past was perfect, when really it was just incomplete. I shut the album and packed it away. Then came the voicemail. It was short, shaky. Evelyn's voice, recorded through the prison phone system. Dad, please. I don't know what happened to me. I lost control. I was scared. I didn't want to hurt you. Darren said it would be quick. That you'd never feel a thing. The line cut out before she could finish. But that one sentence replayed in my mind for hours. You'd never feel a thing. They thought about that detail. They comforted themselves with it. They planned a painless death for me, as if that made it more merciful. As if erasing me gently was somehow less monstrous. I stared at the ceiling all night, wondering what would have happened if I'd just taken a sip. If I had let my guard down, like any trusting father might. But I didn't. I saw it coming. And now, they were the ones who had to live with the fallout. The first thing I did after changing the will was walk the property line, just like I used to when Linda was alive. Back then, it was routine. After long work weeks and church on Sunday, we'd walk the perimeter with a thermos of coffee between us, boots muddy from the garden, our hands always touching somewhere, her fingers on my wrist, mine on the small of her back. Now I walked it alone, mug in hand, the soil dry and brittle beneath my steps. The grass had browned in some patches, the fence needed repainting, but I didn't care. The land still stood. The house was still mine. I had survived my own blood's betrayal, and in the wake of that survival, I realized something terrifying. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel strong. I felt empty. You'd think vengeance might come with relief, some cathartic sense of justice. But all I had was a paper trail of disowned legacies and a mailbox full of letters from lawyers, media requests, and one particularly strange envelope from a church group asking if I would speak at a men's retreat about forgiveness. Forgiveness. The word stung more than it should have. Everyone seemed obsessed with it, as if survival wasn't enough. No, I was also supposed to forgive the ones who tried to kill me. As if the noble thing wasn't drawing a line in the sand, but pretending the wound didn't exist. I hadn't earned forgiveness. I'd earned the right to keep my boundaries sharp. I gave away the cars first, 3 of them. Evelyn had her eye on the Jaguar since the day I bought it. You don't even drive it, she'd say. It's a showpiece. She was right. But that car, like everything else I owned, wasn't about function. It was about memory, about grit. I gave the Jag to a charity that ran job programs for single fathers. The truck went to a local mechanic school. And the Cadillac, Linda's favorite, I kept. I drove it twice that week, down the old coastal roads, windows down, radio low. The air smelled like salt and rain. I half imagined Linda riding shotgun, her fingers tapping the beat of whatever old song was playing. She didn't speak, at least not in words, but in that long, quiet drive, I felt something return to me, a kind of clarity. The house, though, was harder. Every room had Evelyn's laughter sealed in the drywall. Every cabinet carried the memory of her small hands pulling down cereal boxes. I wanted to burn it down and preserve it at the same time. Instead, I did the thing I'd always done when emotion overwhelmed me. I made a list. What to keep, what to give, what to destroy. It was methodical, cold even, but it kept the ache at bay. Her childhood bedroom went untouched for a while, but eventually, I packed it all. The trophies, the yearbooks, the notes to Santa. I kept one photograph, her in overalls, barefoot in the garden at 6 years old, holding a crooked carrot like it was gold. I taped it inside the garage cabinet, behind the tools. Out of sight, but not gone. Around then, a man named Reggie came into my life. He worked for the foundation I had donated to. A former foster kid turned administrator, sharp as hell and honest in a way that disarmed me. He came to thank me in person, shaking my hand with a grip that said he understood more than most. "People like you don't come around often," he said. I shook my head. "People like me made mistakes that needed correcting." He nodded, then added, "Sometimes the best apology to the world is where you leave your last dollar." We talked often after that. He invited me to speak at a mentoring group. I said no at first, then relented. What the hell else did I have to do? So I started showing up. Quietly, anonymously, to these weekly sessions where young men with rough edges sat around folding chairs, trying to pretend they didn't care what anyone thought. But they listened. And when I told them about survival, about betrayal, about building something from nothing only to watch your own blood try to cut you out of it, their eyes didn't wander. They understood that kind of pain. They lived it too. And in their company, I started to feel less like a man who'd been left behind and more like a man who still had something to give. Then, I got the second letter from Evelyn. This one was longer, less desperate. No prison apologies, no sobbing confessions, just memories. "Do you remember when you taught me to drive?" she wrote. "I was so scared, but you just kept saying, 'The car will go where your eyes go, kid. So keep them forward.' I think about that every day now. About how I took my eyes off what mattered. She didn't ask for money, didn't beg for release. But she did ask one thing. Please don't erase me. Not completely. I know I don't deserve a place in your life. But maybe just don't burn the bridge behind you. Not yet." I read that letter 3 times. Once in the chair by the window, once outside on the porch, and once at Linda's grave again, reading it aloud like she might have an answer for me. But silence is often louder than words. I didn't respond. Not yet. Some bridges don't need to burn, but they do need to stay closed. The fallout didn't end there. I ran into one of Evelyn's old friends at the grocery store. Emily, I think her name was. She looked stunned to see me. "Mr. Renner." I just wanted to say, "I'm so sorry." I nodded politely, but she wasn't done. "She talked about you all the time. I don't know what happened to her. It's like she just changed after Linda died. She was never the same." I thanked her, but the words hit deeper than I wanted to admit. Because deep down, I had seen it too. The slow unraveling. The sharp edges. And I'd ignored them for the sake of keeping peace. But peace kept with poison is no peace at all. I hadn't planned to answer the prison call. The number had shown up on my phone a dozen times by then. Always the same sequence. Always accompanied by a knot in my stomach. Most days, I just let it ring. I figured if Evelyn really wanted to talk to me, she could write another letter and let it simmer like the rest. But that afternoon, something shifted. Maybe it was the way the house felt heavier than usual, or maybe it was the silence after I'd set her childhood piano sheet music out by the road with the rest of the donations. Whatever the reason, I picked up. The automated voice confirmed the call. "You are receiving a call from an inmate at Fairfield Correctional Facility." I pressed 1. And then her voice filled the space like a ghost dragging chains behind it. "Dad." It was tentative, raw. Not the voice of the daughter who used to yell across the soccer field for me to watch her score. This one was cracked, stripped down. Prison had taken something from her. Or maybe it had just revealed what was already broken. "I didn't think you'd answer," she said. There was a long pause. I didn't respond. I don't even know where to start. Still nothing from me. I wanted her to feel the weight of silence. It was the closest I could come to making her sit in what she'd done. Finally, she broke. "I'm sorry. I know you don't believe me. I wouldn't either. But I didn't mean for it to happen like that. I thought if you were gone, I thought we could finally breathe." Darren made it sound so clean, so surgical. He said you'd go in your sleep, that there wouldn't be pain. I blinked, eyes dry. "And that made it okay?" Her breath caught. No, it didn't. I wasn't thinking like your daughter anymore. I was thinking like someone drowning." There it was. The excuse. Wrapped in tragedy. Polished with just enough sincerity to make it dangerous. I had expected her to deflect or deny. But this version, this raw confession of moral decay, it unsettled me more than the denial would have. Because part of me still wanted to believe she had a heart beneath the greed. "You didn't try to rob me," I said. "You tried to erase me. Do you understand the difference?" She started to cry, soft, shameful sobs that she tried to hide but couldn't. I do now. Every day, I wake up in that cell and I think, he's alive, and I'm in here. And I deserve it. But it doesn't make it hurt less. You don't get to hurt. I snapped, my voice sharp now. You forfeited that right the second you let that bastard hand you poison and told you it was mercy. There was silence. Not the awkward kind, but the gut-wrenching kind that settles in your chest like a second heartbeat. I imagined her on the other end of the line, head down, cradling the receiver with hands that once held mine. I still love you, Dad, she whispered. I know that doesn't mean anything to you right now, but I needed you to hear it from me. I closed my eyes. There was a time when those words would have brought me to my knees. When hearing, I love you from my daughter was the closest thing to divine grace I ever knew. But now it felt hollow, like it had passed through too many lies to still be real. I changed the will, I said finally. Everything's gone. It all goes to people who would have given anything for what you had and never got. I know, she said, choking back a sob. I read it in the papers. I don't blame you. I wouldn't have left it to me either. She paused, then asked the question I'd been dreading. Does that mean you're done with me forever? I didn't answer right away. I stared out the window at the garden Linda had planted. The hydrangeas were blooming again, almost defiantly. That garden had survived drought, storms, and now betrayal. I remembered Linda's voice the day we brought Evelyn home. She's our legacy. But what no one ever warns you about legacies is that they don't always honor where they come from. Pretend I'm already dead, I said quietly. That's what you wanted, wasn't it? Her breath caught again, and I knew the silence that followed was her crumbling on the other end. I hung up before she could respond. I didn't want her to have the final word, not anymore. The following week, I got a letter from her lawyer. Not asking for clemency, not even trying to negotiate, just a copy of a statement she wrote for her parole hearing. It said she understood her actions, accepted her sentence, and wanted no leniency. I am prepared to serve my time. I betrayed my father, and I've lost the right to ask anything of him again. I didn't cry. I expected to, but the tears never came. Instead, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. Not joy, not triumph, just stillness. I spent more time at the foundation now, helping with workshops, reviewing budgets, mentoring kids who had the same look in their eyes I once saw in my bathroom mirror. They asked questions I wasn't ready for at first. Did your daughter really try to kill you? What does it feel like to cut someone out of your life? But I answered them honestly. It feels like surgery. Painful. Necessary. Sometimes the wound's too deep to stitch. One of the teens, Malik, asked me if I'd ever speak to her again. I shrugged. Maybe. If she ever becomes someone I don't recognize anymore. In a good way. He nodded. Sometimes blood isn't thicker. Sometimes it's just spilled. That stuck with me. I never expected my life to end with this much quiet. No grand finale. No family crowding around my bedside. No daughter kissing my forehead with whispered regrets. Just silence. A thick, sacred kind that moved through my house like smoke through old beams. I wasn't dying, not in body, but something inside me had gone still. Evelyn was gone. Not physically, of course. She was alive, serving her time in a correctional facility 3 hours south. But in every way that mattered to me, she no longer existed. The daughter I raised died the moment she looked me in the eye and offered me poison. Still, I thought of her often. Not with rage, not anymore. That emotion had burned through me and left ash behind. What remained was something closer to grief. Like I'd lost a limb and still felt it twitch sometimes. I'd walk into the den and expect to see her on the couch, flipping through old photo albums. I'd catch myself buying her favorite coffee creamer out of habit. I even found an old voicemail of hers from 2 years ago, laughing about some neighbor's dog chewing through the fence. I listened to it 3 times before deleting it. Nostalgia, I learned, is a thief. It dresses up the past in warm colors and dares you to forget the frost beneath it. I spent more time at the foundation now. The kids, most of them teens, called me Mr. C. Some joked that I looked like a retired mob boss. Others were more respectful, curious. I ran a mentorship group for boys who'd aged out of the foster system, showing them how to balance a checkbook, patch drywall, or look someone in the eye and mean it. They were rough around the edges, sure, but hungry for structure, for stability. And I gave it freely. Not because I was trying to replace what I'd lost, but because I finally understood what legacy really meant. Not wealth, not blood, impact. One boy in particular, Jeremiah, reminded me of myself at 16. Angry, skeptical, too smart for his own good. He asked hard questions. If your daughter hadn't gotten caught, do you think she'd still be smiling in your face? I paused. Probably, I said. That's the worst part. I would have died thinking I mattered to her. He nodded slowly, eyes dark and full of things I didn't ask about. My mom used to say blood keeps you warm in winter, but I think blood can freeze too. He was right. Family isn't automatic. It's earned and kept, like trust. And when it's gone, you can't just sew it back together like a torn sleeve. I received one final letter from Evelyn. It came 6 months after our last phone call, delivered by certified mail with no return address. The handwriting was smaller now, tighter, like someone trying to make themselves small. Inside was a single page. Dad, I've stopped expecting your forgiveness. I know I broke something that can't be fixed, but I wanted to thank you. For the foundation, for not letting me take everything you built and twist it. I've started volunteering here, teaching GED classes. I'm trying to become someone else. Not so you'll take me back, but so I can live with myself. I hope you're well. I think about you every day. Evelyn, I read it once, folded it, and tucked it inside a copy of East of Eden, her favorite book from college. I didn't reply, not because I didn't believe her, but because belief didn't matter anymore. Some chapters aren't meant to be rewritten. They're meant to be closed, sealed, and shelved. She would have to live with the memory of me on her own terms now. I had given her enough of myself already. That winter, I hosted a holiday dinner at the foundation. Cooked everything myself. Roast, garlic potatoes, cornbread, the works. It was noisy and chaotic, kids laughing too loud, teasing each other over the dessert table. And for the first time in years, I felt something warm and clean move through me. It wasn't family in the traditional sense, but it was real, uncomplicated, honest. Reggie raised a toast at the end of the night. To second chances, he said, glass raised. Everyone cheered. I raised mine too. Not because I believed in second chances for everyone, but because I believed in the power of boundaries, of drawing a line in the sand and saying, no further. That's what saved me. Not luck, not justice. Boundaries. I ended the night alone, as usual, walking the perimeter of the property. It had snowed lightly, just enough to blanket the garden. Linda's hydrangeas had withered for the season, but I stood in front of them anyway, as I always did. I whispered her name and told her what she already knew. I buried them when they tried to bury me. Then I walked inside, locked the door behind me, and turned off the lights. Betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes, it wears your daughter's smile and speaks in your own voice. Charles did what many couldn't. He chose survival over sentiment, truth over tradition. If you've ever had to walk away from someone you loved because they chose greed over grace, tell us in the comments. Was your silence the punishment or the protection? Share your story. Someone else might need to hear it. See you soon in the next one.